Hello, my name is Lena. They laughed at me the first night I met them, mocked my every move, called me small. I thought I'd married for love, but I'd married into cruelty. Back in 2018, I decided they would learn just how wrong they were. This is the story of humiliation, cunning, and quiet revenge. The fridge was empty again. I had only myself to rely on. The streets outside were unforgiving. I grew up with nothing, and I learned early that life didn't hand out favors. It demanded grit, resilience, and the ability to fight for every scrap. Then he walked in, the kind of man who makes the world pause when he enters a room. It was 2017, and I was running my shift at my uncle's upscale restaurant. I balanced plates and forced smiles, hiding exhaustion under a professional mask. He arrived with effortless confidence. Designer clothes whispered wealth. Every movement suggested the universe owed him everything, and he already owned it. I noticed how he scanned the room. The faint scent of expensive cologne trailed behind him. The subtle click of polished shoes on marble. The quiet hum of conversation faded as all eyes seemed drawn toward him. A flash of sunlight caught the marble and reflected in my eyes. The weight of a plate in my hand suddenly felt heavier, more fragile. When he reached my section, the atmosphere tightened. Every laugh, every clink of silverware faded into the background. My hands tingled nervously, and I forced a steadying breath. Then he asked for my number. I hesitated. Curiosity and a flicker of hope pushed me to give it. Messages and calls followed, casual at first, then more personal. I thought I had found someone who understood me, or at least, someone who wanted to. We married in 2018, and the fairy tale illusion shattered almost immediately. Behind his charm lurked a controlling, narcissistic side I hadn't seen before. Subtle jabs, dismissive comments about my upbringing, quiet laughter at my expense. It all built slowly, like a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon. The first real test came when we were set to meet his sister and her boyfriend. The airport terminal felt suddenly colder. The echo of rolling luggage and announcements was sharp, almost jarring. It began innocuously with a nickname I didn't understand at first. A nickname that seemed innocent, but something about it made my chest tighten sharply, a flash of dread I couldn't explain. Jordans. They laughed, he chuckled along, and I smiled politely, pretending I didn't notice the odd look in their eyes. I had no idea then, but from that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life would start to crumble. The airport was noisy. Announcements blared. Rolling luggage and hurried footsteps filled the space. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, trying to calm the nervous energy coiling in my stomach. My husband sat beside me, relaxed and smug, as if this were just another routine outing. When they appeared at the gate, his sister's smile was wide, almost too bright. Her boyfriend trailed behind, carrying their bags. My first thought, act normal, stay polite. Don't give them a reason to judge me. But then she saw me. Oh my God, she's totally Jordan's, she exclaimed, her voice ringing with laughter. A cold knot of dread twisted in my stomach. My chest tightened sharply, a flicker of fear I tried to ignore. Jordan's? The word felt sharp, though I had no idea why. The word stuck in my mind. A quiet weapon I didn't yet understand. One that could be wielded to humiliate me publicly. Every time they said it, a small knot formed in my stomach, a warning I didn't yet know how to read. Her boyfriend nodded, grinning, and my husband chuckled, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't place. Jordan's? I asked cautiously. He waved it off. It means she has great style, he said casually. I forced a polite smile. Thank you, I said. But inside, unease coiled tighter. Something about the nickname didn't sit right, though I pushed the thought aside. Throughout the ride to the house, they kept calling me Jordan's, giggling, repeating it like a chant. I laughed along when I could, masking the unease gnawing at me. The house was everything I wasn't used to. Pristine, modern, every surface gleaming. I carried my bag carefully, stepping lightly, not wanting to knock anything over. His family watched me like hawks, their eyes assessing every move. Dinner was polite, conversation casual, but beneath it all lurked something sharp, mockery, maybe even disdain. Every sip of my modest wine, every comment I made seemed to elicit a stifled laugh or the faint clink of a wine glass. The nickname Jordans had already begun its slow work, embedding itself as a symbol of tension I didn't yet fully understand. Later, as the evening wore on and we moved to the living room, I caught my husband sharing a quiet smirk with his sister. My stomach churned. Something was coming, though I didn't know what. And I had no idea just how far their laughter and the nickname would go, or how it would leave me exposed. The second evening arrived. The house felt quieter, but the tension under the surface hummed louder than ever. I had hoped the first night's unease was just nerves, but every glance and whispered giggle reminded me that something darker lingered. We gathered in the living room after dinner. My husband pulled out a bottle of wine, his expensive choice, while his sister smirked at me knowingly. I tried to settle into the couch, but my stomach coiled tight. Anticipation, unease. A warning I didn't yet understand. As the night wore on, wine loosened tongues. The conversation turned into teasing. The teasing had edges sharp enough to cut. They called me Jordans again, giggling, repeating it like a chant. I smiled when I could, masking the growing knot in my stomach. Then came the game. Truth or dare. Laughter ricocheted off the walls. Glasses clinked. Breath hitched in anticipation. My husband's sister dared him to explain the nickname. He paused, grinned. The room leaned in. Jordans are the name we give homeless people who have swag. The words landed against my ribs. My breath caught. Silence stretched for a heartbeat. Their eyes sparkled with mischief. The camera seemed to watch me too. Some of them glanced away, pretending nothing happened. Then the room erupted. Laughter ricocheted around me like bullets. I felt the air leave my lungs. My hands went cold. A metallic taste filled my mouth. I blinked fast, swallowed the tears, and tried to steady my shaking frame. People were laughing at me, at my life, and I couldn't stop the soundless scream in my chest. The next morning, I confronted him. "What the hell was that last night?" I asked. He shrugged, casual. "It's just a joke." I stared at him, something quiet and sharp growing inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a plan began to form, small and precise. A seed taking root. I noticed the camera in the corner, the labels on bottles, the pattern of their movements, details I could use. Every little thing counted. I spent the next day making excuses, keeping busy, pretending. But my mind replayed every laugh, every glance, every subtle smirk. And somewhere inside, a vow whispered itself, "Not now. Not like this." The next morning, the house felt different. Laughter from last night still echoed in my mind, bouncing off walls long after they had left the living room. I moved quietly, careful not to make a sound, pretending everything was normal. But inside, my mind raced, mapping every detail, replaying every smirk, every glance. Breakfast was polite. I poured coffee into mismatched mugs, careful not to touch their fine china. My husband hovered, expecting commentary on their curated silverware, the delicate pastries lined like jewels. I said nothing, smiled faintly, let them chatter around me. But I was noticing, observing, filing away. The placement of the bottles in the bar, the labels on the wine, the camera in the corner, angled to capture the living room. The pattern of gestures, the way they judged every sip of my modest wine. Every small detail became a piece of a puzzle I intended to use. I even made notes on my phone under the guise of a work list. Tequila, replaced before tonight. Watch reactions. Small, precise observations, forming the backbone of a plan. When I handled the tequila, the bottle felt heavier than it should have. Promising, dangerous in its quiet power. A subtle smirk tugged at my lips as I imagined their reactions. One wrong move and they'd see through me. One laugh too early and everything would collapse. Later, my husband's sister suggested a hike. They disappeared into the early morning, leaving me alone with the house. I breathed out, let the quiet settle. Alone, I could move, prepare, observe. By evening, the plan was set. The first move awaited only the right moment. I went to bed early, feigning tiredness, pretending to surrender to normalcy. But my mind remained sharp, every glance, every word from last night, every laugh, cataloged, stored, ready. And somewhere deep down, the thought repeated itself. Not now, but soon. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains. The living room lay quiet, only the faint hum of the fridge. I moved slowly, like a surgeon. every step measured. They were gone on the hike. The house belonged to me for a few hours. I approached the bar with a calm focus. The top shelf bottle glinted in the light. Expensive label, smug confidence. I twisted the cap. The glass was cool against my fingers. Under the countertop, my spare bottle waited. Saws of gold, ordinary, cheap, invisible in their world, perfect. I swapped them, cap for cap, bottle for bottle, quick, clean, no fingerprints, no drama. Then I reset the shelf as if nothing had moved. I filmed a single clip on my phone, one line, quiet and steady. To the laughs, to your oblivion. I poured a few shots and tasted it myself. Burn, truth, a small private victory. Then I wiped the glass, put everything back, and walked away like nothing had happened. By evening, they returned, tired and hungry from the hike. Laughter filled the air. They reached for the tequila with the ease of people who expect the world to be theirs. They poured generous shots, praised the smoothness, the distinguished finish. My lips tightened. Every compliment felt like a footnote to their arrogance. I sipped my modest wine and watched them drink the lie I'd planted. The first move had been made. The mask would crack. Soon, the game was no longer theirs to control. Tonight, they would finally see the truth. The soft light faded into warm shadows, and the house hummed with post-hike chatter, laughter spilling from the kitchen. I sat at the table, wine glass untouched, fingers lightly tracing the rim, calm, measured. Every movement is intentional. They reached for the tequila, expecting luxury. Crystal clear glasses, generous pours, the aroma, smooth, familiar, filled the air. I sipped my modest wine, observing, waiting. Really smooth, my husband murmured, a small crease forming between his brows. His sister echoed a faint laugh, voice slightly high-pitched. Something in their tone, a hesitation, made my chest tighten with quiet satisfaction. A second sip. Eyes darted briefly toward each other. Subtle confusion, a flicker of unease. I maintained neutral calm, letting the tension breathe in the room. Every approving nod they gave the drink was a note of irony, a footnote to their arrogance. I noticed a subtle shift, a twitch at the corner of her mouth, a micro frown barely visible. Her hand hovered midair. The glass paused inches from her lips, betraying the first hint of doubt. They're almost there. They just don't know it yet. My own heartbeat quickened for a fraction, a tiny thrill brushing the edge of fear. Finally, I stood, slow and deliberate, and connected my phone to the TV. The screen lit up, reflecting in their curious eyes. A heartbeat passed, a blink, then the slow dawning of comprehension. I put something together for you, I said, calm, collected. My quiet narration played. The swap, the private tasting, the irony. Their faces mirrored every sip they had praised, now twisted with comprehension. Silence stretched, no laughter, no chatter. Just the weight of realization settling over them like a slow fog. Subtle gestures said it all. A pause in movement, a glance at each other, the almost imperceptible inhale of breath. She dropped her hand onto the table unconsciously, a small sign of surrender. Nothing more needed. Their reactions were pure. I gathered the shot glasses, every clink a punctuation mark. I said nothing, they said nothing. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. Even as I lay down, a faint thrill ran through me, tempered by a memory of my humble upbringing. The satisfaction wasn't cruelty. It was the quiet justice of watching entitlement unravel. And somewhere, a seed of doubt had taken root. Soon, I would see how deep it could grow. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Their usual morning chatter, the clinking of coffee cups, the casual hum of entitlement, it was gone. I moved through the kitchen, pouring my own modest coffee, the rich aroma a small comfort. Outside, sunlight streamed in, golden and unassuming, but inside, the air felt charged with something new, unease. They appeared slowly, hesitant. Her eyes avoided mine. My husband's brow remained furrowed, tight. Something had shifted. Even the subtle confidence they carried like armor seemed lighter, brittle, fragile. Did you make this? His sister asked quietly, nodding toward the spot where the TV had displayed my video. Her voice carried a trembling uncertainty. I smiled faintly, measured, calm. I thought you might appreciate a little clarity before leaving. No accusation, no malice, just the quiet assertion of control. They exchanged glances, no words coming. Each step they took felt calculated, uncertain. For the first time, they were off balance. Their usual composure had crumbled. Later, when my husband tried to defend his family, I didn't argue. I simply let him speak, watching the careful, rehearsed words falter. He realized quickly that his sister's judgment had shifted, that the narrative he'd always relied on, our shared upper-class superiority, had been exposed as hollow. By evening, they were tense, the earlier laughter replaced by guarded smiles. I poured my modest wine and watched quietly as they sipped the tequila, now with cautious, scrutinizing glances. The words distinguished and smooth sounded hollow, empty, almost absurd in the wake of the revelation. Every compliment, every nod of approval was a lie. Their pride forced them to perform. They left the next day, the air between us taut, charged with unspoken understanding. My husband's sister refused even a goodbye hug. When we visited their parents in Europe later, she didn't come to see us. They had learned, silently but completely, that the rules had changed. I stayed behind, reflecting, alone. The quiet of the house felt like an affirmation. The tension of previous days, the subtle humiliations, had been paid back, not with cruelty, but with precision and dignity. I sipped my coffee and allowed myself a small, private smile. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this chapter was over. Yet a part of me remained vigilant. Life had taught me early. Confidence can mask cruelty, but truth, carefully revealed, has its own power. I closed the notebook where I'd kept my little notes, the lines still visible. Every detail matters. Observe, wait, act. The lessons remained, even as the players shifted, silent but changed forever. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it. Truly, undeniably free. The house was eerily quiet that morning. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, golden and unassuming, spilling across the polished floors. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the lingering warmth of yesterday's chaos. I moved slowly, deliberately. Each step was a quiet assertion that the morning and the day changed for me. I poured a cup of coffee. The rich aroma curled into the air, twisting like smoke I could almost read. I cradled the mug in my hands, warmth grounding me, a tactile anchor to a world I had fought to master. They were gone, my ex-husband, his sister, the remnants of their carefully curated pride. Their silence after last night said more than any words ever could. Every glance, every hesitant gesture whispered acknowledgement. The rules had changed. I allowed myself a small, private smile. Not cruelty, not vengeance. Satisfaction, quiet and complete. I had navigated the humiliation, survived the subtle cruelty, and turned their arrogance back on them without losing myself in the process. I set the coffee down gently, closing my notebook with deliberate care. Notes, plans, observations, they were all behind me now, like tools I no longer needed but knew I could reach for if required. My hands lingered over the surface, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingertips. Victory, autonomy, control. Outside, the world moved on, oblivious to the small private reckoning that had unfolded here. And yet, I knew life would test me again. Not with laughter or cheap nicknames, but in subtler forms, hidden behind polite conversation and quiet smiles. I would be ready, always ready. I took a final sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. The sunlight shifted across the floorboards, marking time in a gentle, steady rhythm. I watched it, silent and steady. Somewhere beyond these walls, the world waited, but I was ready. I had survived, I had acted, I had emerged intact, unbroken, free. A smile tugged at my lips, soft, private. The house, the sunlight, the ordinary quiet, they were mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it fully, quiet, undeniable freedom.